Now, I know that game week 6 isn't even over yet, but if you know me, you know that means it doesn't stop me making some FPL content, and there's already plenty to talk about. And in this video, I'm going to go through players to buy and avoid ahead of game week 7. Just quickly, before we get into the video, all of the predicted points data that you see here is powered by Fantasy Football Hub. They also have a fantastic AI team rating tool, which I use really well to build my wildcard team in Game Week 6. And I suggest that you could do the same for your team. I get you 50% off in the link in the description below, which lasts until the 30th of September. There's only limited time left to make use of that offer, so check it out. Link in the description. So I'm going to start off with a bit of data that I think is really useful in FPL. First up, I've got this metric, rest of season projected goal involvements, courtesy of Rob T FPL on Twitter. Now, this data was actually put together ahead of the game week 6 deadline. So some of the, well, all of the players, of course, if they scored or got an assist since, it's not going to be updated in this tool. But regardless, I still think it's useful to look at the prediction for the remainder of the season and how many returns players are expected to get. And the reason I really like this Rob T FPL data is because he gets it from spread betting markets. And gambling companies, betting companies, they invest millions in their algorithms to project the outcome of football matches, players' odds to score, etc. So why would you not use their £1 million worth of, or millions of pounds worth of investments to help you improve your own FPL game? And that's exactly what I'm trying to do by showing you this data. Now, I don't necessarily think there are a massive amount of surprises in this list, which I think kind of suggests, well, it suggests one thing really. A lot of people I've seen on Twitter, for example, critiquing people for having template-looking teams. There are a lot of players that top this list that people would consider sort of template players, right? Haaland, Salah, Saka, Palmer, Son, Foden, Havertz. All of these guys are kind of template players, but these are the guys that are projected to do really well in the league this season. And for me, the interesting things, I guess, to pick out are not necessarily the totally obvious picks. Obviously, Haaland, Salah, Saka, Palmer, Son, they're always going to be up there as the top players for projected returns, right? And I would say, you've got to choose your battles really on which ones you pick, I guess. But the interesting thing, I guess, is to look at the players that aren't necessarily performing all that well at the moment that are still predicted to do really well for the rest of the season. So players like Eze, who's still towards the top there. He's had a relatively disappointing start to the season, but he is still projected to do really well. Likewise, Jarrod Bowen. Obviously, West Ham have not had the best start to the season, but he's projected to still do quite well. I'm not going to go through all the players there. Other players maybe to pick out. Chris Wood's up there as one of the top strikers in the game. Maddison, Bernardo Silva, interesting. I'm not too sure about Bernardo Silva. Savinho of Man City, Brennan Johnson of Tottenham, Trossard and Martinelli, who I might talk about in this video a bit later on, are up there as well. You can see for yourself, but these are, according to the betting markets at least, the top players for projected goals for the rest of the season. If you wanted, you could pause the video for yourself to take a look in a bit more detail. Next up, I've got some data from 11ify. So these are clean sheet odds for the next 5 game weeks. And again, I'm not going to point out the obvious top teams here. Obviously, Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool are good defences, and you would expect them to be towards the top of any sort of clean sheet odds metric, right? And that's what you're seeing there. Man City top, Arsenal second, Liverpool third. But the interesting thing is the other teams, the best of the rest, I guess, because those are the kind of teams where, it's obvious that Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool defenders are going to do quite well. But where the real decisions are made are the other defenders that you pick. And we've got Brentford as one of the top teams for clean sheet odds for the remaining 5. The next 5. Everton, Nottingham Forest are up there as well. So those 3 teams, Everton, Brentford, Nottingham Forest, it's obvious, like I keep saying, that Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool are going to keep clean sheets. But looking at the projections, Brentford defenders, Everton defenders, Nottingham Forest defenders should be on your list of potential players to buy as well. So in addition to those clean sheet odds, we've got the same for projected goals. And again, I don't think, it's a surprise to see Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool as top teams for scoring goals, right? We've kind of seen that in seasons gone by. Again, the interesting thing, I guess, to pick out is the other teams, the other potential top teams that are in there. But I've got to say, projected goals wise, right, I don't think there are any major surprises here. And it's kind of showing that the traditional quality of teams is proving to be the case in some of these projections. And I go back to, you know, people saying template teams are boring, etc. And, you know, you can see it's kind of, I would say the template teams here are projected to score the most goals, but, you know, the template teams are template because, you know, they contain the best kind of players. And ultimately, you know, I don't see any teams sort of in the bottom half of the league where there might be some differentials or surprise players, etc., that, you know, that come towards the fray here. It's the top teams that are projected to score the most goals, and that's the basic fact of it. I guess in terms of potential differentials within that, or players of interest, I guess. I mean, for Man City, obviously Erling Haaland is going to be top of the tree, right? I know he blanked in game week 6, but that's obviously, I would not let that put me off picking him. Arsenal obviously have Saka, Martinelli, Trossard, Havertz. Liverpool, Salah, Luis Diaz, all performing really well. Obviously, Robertson and Trent from a defensive perspective as well. Spurs, Solanke, Maddison is actually putting up some pretty incredible numbers as well. Man United are interestingly up there. I think Højlund is either going to be back fit for game week 6 or at least back for game week 7. That might really help improve things. Actually having a natural number 9 playing up front for Man United, I think, will make them a lot better. And also potentially, for people that have kept the faith in Bruno Fernandes, it might mean that he actually gets some returns. Chelsea, I mean, we've just seen, I'm going to talk about Cole Palmer in a second, we've just seen what he produced. Chelsea, I must say, they're actually looking pretty decent this season, both from a defensive perspective. They've kept a couple of clean sheets in the last 3 games. And from an attacking perspective as well. Enzo Maresca has got them playing really well. Aston Villa too. Brentford have got some really good fixtures. Newcastle, I've been a little bit disappointed with them so far, but they have been kind of plagued with injuries, I guess, and not necessarily playing to their top form, but they're kind of up there as well. So yeah, that's just an idea, I guess, of top teams and players for projected goals. Actually, I'm just going to go back to this a second because I think it might suggest some players that you might potentially want to avoid. So looking at the bottom teams, Nottingham Forest, for example, Crystal Palace, Fulham, Ipswich, I don't think many people have Ipswich, Leicester, Wolves or Southampton attackers, but those kind of, you know, Bournemouth as well. Some games, well, particularly match day 8 and match day 10, or game weeks 8 and game weeks 10, Bournemouth are projected to score, trying to get my words out there, less than 1 goal in those game weeks. So, you know, people might have hopped on Semenyo, Tavernier, players like that. They're predicted to score less than a goal in a couple of game weeks in the next sort of 4 or 5, right? Everton, not too bad, I guess. Nottingham Forest, again, they're all kind of predicted to be fairly frugal in terms of the number of goals they score. Crystal Palace as well. So yeah, that might give you an idea of, you know, there are popular players from these teams. And I'm not one to talk because I own them, right? I own Chris Wood, I own Eze. But looking at their teams, they're not projected to score all that many goals. Now, I'm taking a little bit of a risk talking about Solanke in the context of Game Week 7 because, of course, he hasn't played yet in Game Week 6. But I really like him as an option. I picked him. I was on my wildcard in Game Week 6 and I personally picked him. I really like the thought of going for him as a little bit of a differential. He's under 10% ownership. And last season and this season for Spurs, he's proven to be a Premier League goal scorer, right? Over 37 games last season. I know he's only got 3 starts and 1 goal so far this season, but you know, he's proven he can score for Tottenham and he's looked pretty dangerous. 0.79 expected returns per 90. So for Tottenham this year, he is putting up better underlying numbers than he did for Bournemouth last year. I know it's only a small sample size of 3 starts, right? But he's putting up better underlying numbers than he did for Bournemouth last year, where he scored 19 goals. So for me, that suggests, provided, you know, he doesn't start getting rotated out of the team with Richarlison, etc. coming back. That might be the only kind of risk there, but I do think he's definitely Ange's first choice number 9. That's the whole reason he bought him, in my opinion. You know, his underlying numbers are better than last season, which suggests he's probably going to score more goals. And he got 19 goals in the Premier League last season. So, you know, extrapolate that out a little bit. Suggests he's going to score more than 19 goals based on how he's been performing so far. Brighton away, West Ham at home, and Crystal Palace away as the next 3 fixtures after, of course, he plays Man United in 6. You know, I think that's a really good set of fixtures. He seems to be the nailed-on number 9 for Spurs. You know, I don't think Son is actually out. There's a little bit of doubt going into that Man United game as to whether Son plays or not. And, you know, if it is, I think there's a really low chance it's a medium to long-term injury for Son. I think at maximum he misses 1 game. But if Son is out, you've got to think that Solanke becomes the penalty taker, right? And I think, you know, when you're looking at differentials, most differentials that people are considering are risky players, whose minutes might be, you know, subject to rotation, etc. But I don't think that's the case with Solanke. And you know, based on what he did last season, he is a proven, you know, nearly 20 Premier League goals for Bournemouth last year. So in terms of a nice low-owned striker, I think he's as safe as it gets. I really like him as an option at 7.5. I can't get enough of Bryan Mbeumo, and if you don't have him in your team, I don't know what you're doing with yourself. I would say he's one of the most important players to be bringing into your FPL team right now. He is just Brentford's absolute talisman and best player. I think he's one of the best forwards in the league so far this season, right? Proven to be that way. I'd be surprised if he stayed at Brentford more than, well, this season, basically. He's on penalties, free kicks, plays 90 minutes. I mean, those are all of the good things that I personally look for in an FPL asset, right? A player that's on the pitch for every minute, a player that takes penalties, and a player that takes free kicks. So he's on the pitch for every minute. His team doesn't necessarily need to be playing well for him to score a goal because he's got the opportunity to take pens and free kicks, both of which he's fairly good at as well, and I'd expect him to score from. And yeah, I just really like him as an option. And when you look at the other kind of midfielders around his price point, right? I'm not necessarily saying Eze anymore because I think there's 0.4 million in it in terms of their prices, but you know, comparing the two, you got to think he's better than Eze. You know, Eze's only got a goal, I believe, this season so far, and Mbeumo's on 5. And also with Eze, there's a little bit of a, you know, I guess a dilemma as to who's going to take the penalties for Palace. It's between him and Mateta now, as Oliver Glasner, the Palace manager, said when Mateta scored his penalty a couple of game weeks ago. Whereas with Brentford, you know that Mbeumo is the nailed-on penalty taker, right? And if you're looking for a midfielder under 8 million, I don't think you can do any better than Bryan Mbeumo. He scored 5 goals from 6 starts so far this season. The guy just looks on absolute fire. And when you look at his underlying numbers, per 90, he's not actually performing as well as he did last season. So, you know, it suggests that maybe there's more room for him to grow and do even better. You know, that's why I'm looking at it. Wolves at home, Man United away, and Ipswich at home in their next 3. You know, I would say those are games where he could score in each of them. I would say if you're watching this video, you might well probably own Mbeumo already. But if you don't, I would say he's probably your #1 priority to get in. I can't make a video about Game Week 7 without talking about what Cole Palmer just did in Game Week 6, right? He produced one of the highest scoring FPL game weeks of all time. I think he needed an extra goal to beat Salah's record. I think Salah's record is 29 points in a single game week. I think Cole Palmer with bonus will end up on 24. Yeah, the guy's incredible, right? I can't, you know, it's not like I'm saying anything groundbreaking saying that Cole Palmer is a good option, right? He's on penalties, free kicks, plays 90 minutes of every game, ticks all the boxes, similar to Mbeumo, right, of a good FPL asset, but he's probably just that step above Mbeumo. What I would say is just due to team structure, etc., you've kind of got the decision to make of do you pick Palmer or do you pick Saka? Because, you know, some people might be able to afford both, but for most, I think it's probably one or the other. But I think you could probably say that Cole Palmer is just that little bit better. He is really picking up where he left off last season. You can see there's really not much in it in terms of the expected returns per 90, goals compared to games and XG, etc. You know, last season, a lot of people called him a penalty merchant. Even I sort of doubted his ability to match the numbers that he put up last season. And I know, you know, he scored 4 goals in the game in Game Week 6, right? So, you know, the stats he's putting up this season, quite a lot of that has been achieved in just that single game. But I wouldn't let that put me off, right? And the only thing that would kind of put me off, is that he's playing Forest, Liverpool, and well, Newcastle not so great defensively. But I would say that Forest and Liverpool in particular are quite frugal teams when it comes to conceding goals. I know Forest lost in Game Week 6, but they only conceded a single goal to Fulham. And then Liverpool have kept, well, we'll see how the game in Game Week 6 goes. I've recording this just as they kick off their game against Wolves. But so far this season, Liverpool have kept 4 clean sheets from 5 games. In worst case, you know, they will have kept 4 clean sheets in 6 games. So I think Forest and Liverpool are pretty good defensively. And comparing Palmer to Saka, who I believe has, well, he's got Bournemouth and some good fixtures coming up as well. I think fixtures-wise, Saka probably edges it. But in terms of stats, contribution to the team, pens, free kicks, etc., even though obviously Saka's on pens, I think Palmer probably edges it over Saka now. But yeah, I mean, I can't make a video about Game Week 7 without talking about Cole Palmer, right? And I'd be interested, if anyone's watching at this point, let me know in the comments if you had Palmer in your team and if he was your captain for Game Week 6. I just wanted to plug myself a little bit here, right? Because it was a little bit of a joke coming into Game Week 6. But at the end of my, I believe it was my buy and avoid video I made going into Game Week 6, I shouted out Dwight McNeil as a nice little differential. And he got 2 goals in game week 6 as a result of me after me saying that. So I'm quite happy with that. That should say, sorry, 5 attacking returns from 6 games so far this season. Everton, of course, have been poor, but Dwight McNeil's got on assists and scored goals, right? So it doesn't really matter how Everton have played. He's still played really well. And I would actually say, you know, those upcoming fixtures for McNeil, Newcastle, Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton, West Ham, Brentford, Man United and Wolves, those are all games where Everton could score and Dwight McNeil could be involved. And I think there are so many options at this price point for midfielders, right? Semenyo, Smith Rowe, Rodgers, McNeil's in there as well. There are others that I've probably forgotten and not even mentioned. That list of sort of sub 5.5, well, sub 6 million midfielders is really big now. And I would definitely add Dwight McNeil to that list with the level of returns that he's put up. The one thing I would say is that he is really outperforming his XG. I think the 2 goals that he scored in game week 6 would have been fairly low XG. You can see there 3 goals from only 0.5 expected goals. But he has put up 3 expected assists. So, you know, he's proven to be fairly creative. Yeah, I just want to credit myself. I know I don't like patting myself on the back, but I suggested Dwight McNeil coming into game week 6 as a bit of a jokey differential. And he ended up scoring 2 goals. And you can't deny, right, the numbers he's put up this season are pretty good. So, I mean, he's looking like a pretty decent option. I'm a little bit midfielder heavy in this video, I'll admit. But I do think Trossard and Martinelli could be pretty decent options, particularly considering that Odegaard is out at the moment. I think the minutes for both of these players are going to be fairly safe. Trossard, Martinelli and Havertz all started together in the game in game week 4. Oh, game week 4, game week 6. And I don't think that's going to really change for the Southampton fixture either. I think both of these players should start that game, and likewise against Bournemouth as well. With no Odegaard, I think that's probably the best sort of team that Arsenal can field. Alongside, of course, Saka and Havertz. So yeah, I think I wouldn't say their minutes are completely safe and they're nailed on, but I think right now it's probably the safest minutes, safest minutes for both of these players that you're going to see all season. And yeah, Arsenal were proven to be good from a goal scoring perspective. A lot of people have been saying that they've not been all that good in terms of scoring goals this season, but that's because they spent a lot of this season with only 10 men on the pitch. Don't forget, Rice got sent off against Brighton, Trossard got sent off against Man City. So they have played quite a fairly large portion of this season with 10 men. They proved against Leicester when they have 11 men that they can score goals. They obviously scored 4 in that game, right? So you've got to think, as a result of that, if they're on the pitch at least, Trossard and Martinelli should be good options. And I just want to shout them out, basically, because I think despite him being still towards the top of the predicted points, right, Eze's got 6.2 predicted points in the Fantasy Football Hub model against Liverpool. I'm an Eze owner and I've had enough now. And I'm looking to offload him. And I think maybe one of Trossard or Martinelli could be the players that I bring in to replace him with. I know Eze is going to be he's still 20% owned in the game, right? So I know a fair few people watching this video will probably be an Eze owner. So yeah, I've tried to suggest a few replacements. So Mbeumo obviously being one of them. Trossard, Martinelli potentially being others. McNeil, nice differential, could also kind of replace him. So I'm talking sort of from a selfish perspective really about replacing Eze, I guess. But not only that, these guys are obviously good options. And I thought I'd finish the video just by looking at the top midfielders next week for projected points. Just thought it'd be a useful metric considering it's been a bit of a midfielder heavy video. So we got Palmer, Salah, Saka, Eze, Mbeumo, Trossard and Bowen as the top midfielders for expected points in game week 7. Keep forgetting it's game week 7. Can't believe we're at game week 7 already, to be honest. Seems absolutely crazy. So yeah, those are your top midfielders. In fact, to finalise the video, let me know in the comments which one of these that you own. Alright, and that's the end of the video. That one felt a little bit rambly to me, so hopefully all of the points and stuff that I made there makes sense and you agree with the players that I've suggested. Well, I don't. Ultimately, FPL is all about different opinions, right? So if you don't necessarily agree with the players that I've shouted out there, I'd be happy to hear about it in the comments. Just be polite about it. Yeah, like I said, it did feel a bit rambly, that video, but hopefully it kind of made sense where my thinking was in terms of players to buy and avoid, etc. And I really do like the data, the remaining projected goals from RobTFPL. I'm just going to show that again. Opportunities to pause the video again. This kind of data and RobTFPL in general on X or Twitter is just absolute gold dust to help you with FPL. I really, really rate it myself and find it really useful. So I want to do my best to promote Rob and share that data with you. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. Again, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with the picks that I mentioned there. I think that's it. Thank you very much for watching. and I will catch you in my next video.